The Blocktalk Podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blocktalk Podcast. So this year on the podcast, we are speaking to industry leaders and professionals about the future of property management, looking ahead to 2030, which I just realised earlier is not that far away, and that is the year I'll be 60, which is a bit more worrying, I think, to me anyway. Looking ahead to 2030 and what changes in predictions people have. So today I'm delighted to welcome Vincent Goldie, CEO of Newton Property Management. Vinnie took up a position as CEO about 5 months ago, and before that was CFO for 14 months at Newton. Prior to joining Newton, Vinnie was FD at Creditfix, CFO for Together Energy, Director of Finance at Sure Thing Insurance, and a finance business partner with AXA Commercial. Vinnie has a young family and he's a bit of a petrol head, which we talk about on many occasions when I speak to him. And I spent a bit of time with Vinnie actually over the since he joined Newton, which has been good. How are you? You well?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No, I'm really glad you decided to come on. It's really good. Okay, so let's start with, we've got pretty much the same questions for all the kind of business leaders of the property management sector in Scotland that come on. So let's start with major changes you foresee happening by 2030.
Okay, so I think the main industry challenges that we'll have over the next few years are the conclusion of the Tenements Working Group recommendations, excuse me, which are likely to conclude on recommending that buildings get MOTs effectively, where a block of flats, if gets a report done on the general condition of the building, with likely maintenance costs as well. It'll encourage owners to contribute towards improving the condition of the properties. I think what you see inevitably with flats is that quite often customers will live in a flat maybe at the start of their journey in property or at the end of the journey in property. So quite often it's not a long-term thing, but that's not always the case. So I guess if you get to the point where you've got that report, trying to get buy-in from customers to make investment to improve the longer term condition of the stock could be quite challenging.
Yeah, I think it's always been on this podcast has been a recurring theme over time, and that is education to people about, what is a factor, what does a factor do, and all of these sort of things. And a lot of people who are downsizing from a house to as you alluded to later in life, into a flat, they've never come across a factor. I mean, because most developments were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, didn't have factors. Everything was adopted by the councils. And in fact, I look back at my dad, who still lives in the same house as I grew up in. He knows what I do for a living, but he has no idea what a factor actually does. Because he lives in a house that obviously doesn't have that. So yeah, I get it. And I guess the other thing is that because of common hold and freehold, and nobody's actually forcing them to do things, buildings can decay, can't they? Because people aren't doing things.
And you're right. I mean, we see it quite often as the misconception around what a factor can and can't do, and what a factor should and shouldn't do. And it's that education piece, and it's important that that's communicated in the right way, and just trying to reinforce that message as often as possible. Which can be challenging.
I remember sitting at dinner. I've probably mentioned this a few times before. Memory starts going when you get a bit older. I always remember my father saying that to me, and I was like, God, I'm never going to get to that age. And now I find myself there. But I always remember I was sitting at dinner. I was sitting beside an accountant, I think it was, who asked me what I did.
Careful.
No. Who asked me what I did for a living, and I said what I did, and they went, "Oh, do you know? I just that's funny you should say that, because I'm having a conversation with my factory woman, because I've been paying them money for years, and now they want me to give them more money to fix this thing."
Mm.
And I'm like, is that not how it works?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
no, yeah, it's again another misconception is I pay a factor fee and that should cover everything. Well, no, that's that covers us as a business to provide that service, and then anything that needs repaired or replaced is over and above that. It's that's quite a challenging thing to overcome.
Yeah, I can imagine. I guess the difference between England and Scotland, though, is in England you get, well, depending on the leasehold, the lease and in the leasehold you live in, you don't really get a choice. It happens, you have to pay it. In Scotland, if you don't want to pay it, then often it doesn't get done.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. My eldest son is currently looking for a flat in London, which is scary enough given the price tag. But I said to him, "So are you going to have the roof checked?" And he's like, "What are you talking?" Because it's an old building. And actually, it's share of freehold.
Right.
It's an old building. Have you had the roof checked? Why would they do that? I'm like, yeah, it's an old building. Go check the roof, because otherwise you're in for an eighth of the cost. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, just in terms of other things that I think, the industry, the sort of main industry challenges over the next few years related to the Tenement Working Group recommendations is the Scottish Law Commission consultation on compulsory owners associations. I think the initial consultation request responses by August this year. And the Law Commission are considering whether to recommend the government that every block of flats in Scotland has to be run by a group of owners as a body corporate.
Okay.
The Owners Association can then either manage the block of flats or appoint a professional manager, such as a factor.
Yeah.
Okay. The challenge, however, would come when none of the flat owners step forward to nominate themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
In this circumstance, the Law Commission may foresee a stopgap arrangement being legislated for where a local authority of housing association is installed as the factor.
Okay. Wow. I wasn't aware of that last bit. Okay. That's an interesting, because I mean, you get a block of 6, especially if 4 of them are let, is anyone actually interested in stepping up? Or, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility there as well. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, you do get better engagement with committees quite often. So it's quite often an easier way or a better way, more efficient, effective way of getting things done in the property. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Any other challenges you've
improvement in fire safety legislation. I think certainly we would like to see retrospective powers to fit fire detection. And smoke extraction systems in older buildings. At the start of the year, tragically, we had 2 fatalities in one of our buildings in Aberdeen.
Okay.
And there were no fire detection systems in the stairwells.
Wow.
And a significant number of the flats in Scotland are in the same boat. So yeah, that's definitely something we would like to see.
Okay.
And we do have Derek back at the offices championing that.
Right, okay. Championing it from
lobbying the government.
Right, okay.
Yeah, lobbying the government to try and push these things forward.
Yeah, I suppose when it's closer to home, you know what I mean, from the point of view of happening in one of your buildings, it becomes a forefront of your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. Yeah.
Absolutely, but I guess until something like that happens, you don't think about it. Like that. So yeah, getting retrospective safety systems in older buildings, I think would be great if we could get it.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so next question for you. Okay, this is probably right up your street. How do you think automation and given the conversation we've had over the last year, how do you think the automation and digitization will impact the landscape in the next 6 years?
So it's a really good question, and you'll know we've been very engaged with CPL about using the technology effectively, efficiently, the way it was designed to be used, but also trying to enhance that with services around the peripheral. So, I think that it's going to be very important. I think what we've seen, not just in factoring, but in a lot of businesses, is the demand from customers has been increasing, significantly post-COVID, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
And if we're able to streamline and automate processes, it will allow us to serve customers as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
Yeah.
We've actually recently appointed somebody internally as a business process manager to help us with this work in the coming months and years ahead. Things like chatbots, AI, and I know we've got a question on AI later on, but things like that can fulfill simple requests that don't really need a human intervention. That'll free up staff to dedicate their time to more complex tasks. You're really just focusing on how to serve the customer better.
Yeah. I mean, technology. I mean, I've for many years worked in tech. In fact, pretty much my entire working life in software, and people often see software as a reason or a way to save money. Okay, but actually, and that is true. At the end of the day, automate process, manual process disappears. No body no longer required to do process, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. Everyone understands that. But it's then what you do. If you then just take that as a way to make more margin, okay, that's fine, and that's your decision. If you then take that as a way to go, do you know, at the end of the day, we have a fixed cost base. So let's take that person and use them to give our customers a better service experience journey, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
And I would say that's definitely the journey that Newton has been on. We've made a lot of changes internally in the last 6 to 9 months, and that's not just from a people's perspective, it's also from a technology perspective and a process perspective as well. There's been a lot of investment into trying to improve our systems and our processes so that we can serve our customers better. So it's a very important part of my strategy for moving forward.
Good, excellent. Okay, so on to the next question. There's a lot of focus on the environment in terms of pesticides and greener energy. How do you think this will affect your business?
So I think we need to make it easier to install energy efficient systems into common area of a block of flats. At the moment, it has to be all owners that agree to install a communal EV charger or solar panels. It can be quite challenging to overcome, especially coming back to the point we were making earlier about people starting or ending their journey in property and flats. They might not necessarily look at it as a long-term investment and therefore may not be prepared to spend the money on that sort of thing. So the Tenement Maintenance Working Group have recommended that the Tenements Act is amended to just requiring a simple majority vote.
Okay.
I think the SNP endorsed this change as a party policy at last year's SNP conference.
Okay.
But until they actually, go ahead with it, then we're kind of in limbo, and owners are disadvantaged negatively because of that.
Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. And you're right. It is. That's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Actually getting decisions and getting everybody on board to make these things happen.
Yeah, especially with, if the share of ownership in a building, for example, is more weighted towards buy to let. Landlords may not necessarily be living in the property and therefore are only really interested in making sure it's of a good enough standard for their tenants, and may not be willing to invest that kind of money to put energy efficient systems in place.
Yeah. No, I get you. Okay. What about the buy-to-let versus ownership landscape, and how will that affect what you do and how you operate?
Yeah. So for me personally, it doesn't change what we do or how we operate, whether that's an owner that lives in the property or it's a tenant and it's the landlord that owns the property. We still have a customer to serve at the end of the day, whether that's the owner or the landlord. And we need to make sure that we provide them the service that they expect and need to receive from us as a factor. I guess the only challenging thing for me is that, if you've got owners in a block of flats, they might be keen to invest in the property, get things done, whether that's maintenance, repairs, upgrades, enhancements, whereas the landlords may not necessarily be inclined to do so. They just want to make sure it's of a good standard for their tenants, and they don't really want to invest the money in it. So, but that just comes down to communication. Making sure that you communicate with all owners, whether it's a landlord or an actual owner, that we can do X, Y, and Z. This is the cost. Do you want to go ahead with it or not? It all comes down to communication and not leaving things outstanding, let's say. So if there's a majority to proceed and it's paid for, go ahead and do it. If there's not a majority to proceed, you at least let the owners know that we've not been able to do that and we can't take it forward at this time. It just comes down to communication.
And I guess coming back to that, the law commission stuff, if there is then simpler, or legislation actually, if there is then simpler ways to get a majority, simpler ways to get decisions made on properties and make things happen, then that's going to help with that, right?
Absolutely. That would be helpful.
Okay, so there's some talk about how the tide will turn back as people will be craving human connection as opposed to the isolation of social media and online interaction. And that's actually quite an interesting thought, because I was having this conversation with my business coach this morning, but also this is one of the only face-to-faces of this that we've done.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because the studio's been set up for ages. Yeah, the studio's been set up for ages, but I end up sitting here and talking to someone who's on a screen. Okay. So we need to do more of these. I much prefer them actually. Okay, but would you agree with that? And how do you think that will impact factory?
I think it's a tricky one to answer, because I think the needs and wants of every customer and every generation is going to be different. Post-COVID, with people working from home and stuff like that, I think there is a demand for human interaction.
Yeah.
And certainly, I'm not a fan of emails. You could be 10, 15 emails deep that could be a 10-minute conversation on the phone, or a 15-minute meeting face-to-face. I think there's a lot of value in having that face-to-face relationships. That said, I would like to see an increased social media presence for Newton, something that we're kind of dipping our toe in the water with a little bit. But it's a difficult one to navigate. I think you can see a lot of different types of communication and online, so it's difficult to control that narrative. But I think there's definitely value in face-to-face, definitely, and I would always advocate that for our business.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get it. I get the 15 email deep thing, because you're. The other thing with email communication for me is it's very, very, very difficult to get tone in an email.
It is.
So actually, I wrote something to someone this morning and I sent it, and then after I sent it, I was like, someone could actually pick that up the wrong way.
No, it's easy done.
Yeah. So actually, face to face, they get the body language, they get the tone of your voice, they get all of that sort of stuff. I have to say that, although I work remotely quite a lot, I do enjoy coming into this office, and that sort of interaction. I do get your navigation of social media being reasonably difficult for a factor, though, because you just, everyone's different. How many clients do you have now?
35,000.
35,000.
Just
so
that,
yeah. So that's 35,000 people who could react in 35,000 different ways to an email. I can't imagine that's not easy. Yeah,
it's not easy, and you could. I've done it myself. You type up an email and you'll read it again, like you mentioned earlier. You'll read it again and you think, well, maybe I shouldn't. Even though there is absolutely no intent
Yeah,
it can be misconstrued and just read the wrong way, even though it's not actually meant that way. That's why I would much prefer phone call or face to face, because and I've also done it the other way. I've received emails where I've read it and I've like, oh, it's a bit out of order, and then I think, no, it's probably not. There's absolutely. So I think for me personally, human connection is super important. A lot about what we do is about having good relationships with customers, and the only way to do that is certainly isn't by email. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I get it. In fact, actually, it reminds me of something else. I've mentioned already. Yeah, I spoke about Oliver. In fact, I shouldn't, because his head's big enough already. But he sends me an email after every session that we have. But if he wants to talk to me about something, he never sends me an email. Reason being, it will take him ages to type it. He will reread it 3 or 4 times to make sure it's been received, or it will be received in the way he's meant to write it.
Yeah.
So what does he do? He just leaves me a voice note, because I can get the tone from his voice. I know what he's saying. Okay, may cock a couple of things up when he's speaking, but he's, it's fine. So I get, it is. I'm much, the whole human, less digital interaction. Although, and it does depend on the generation of your client.
Absolutely, and there is a generational thing there. We have staff, a wide range of ages, and some of them are more comfortable having telephone and face-to-face conversations, whereas others would much prefer to do the email thing. And I definitely think there is a generational thing there, absolutely. But it's certainly something that I encourage in the business is phone and face-to-face. Over email, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh no. Okay, cool. Right. Last question. This is quite an interesting one, actually. Is there ever a time when property managers will be replaced by AI?
Short answer, no. Whilst AI has been around for a while, I think it's a fairly new concept in the mainstream. Newton hasn't done anything with AI yet, and I think it'll be a case of watch this space and see how we can utilize it for streamlining and automation of simple tasks. And while I can see a use case for that aspect within the business, I don't see it replacing property managers. Go back to what we were talking about a second ago, and with relationships, you're not going to get that from AI. Property managers that understand the customers, understand the buildings, who can have a phone conversation with customers, who can meet them face to face, you're not going to get that from AI. However, I do think there's definitely a use case for it in terms of streamlining processes and automation of simple tasks, so that frees up the property managers to deal with the more complex stuff like I was talking about earlier on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, definitely reading of invoices and outputting of information, reading of deeds and answering simple questions and these sort of things. There's absolutely no doubt that that's available. And even responses to, or not responses, suggested responses possibly to queries and these sort of things, making sure that something's written in an articulated fashion with no dubiety. Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, we spoke about it earlier, typing emails. If you can get something that kind of puts something in a certain way, then I would agree. These sort of things are the first step into that process.
Definitely the first step, but who knows what the future holds, right? But technology is advancing at an astounding rate. But for me, at this moment in time, and certainly for the medium to long term as well, I think the relationship is such a critical part of the business that you're not going to get that from AI. But there's definitely a use case for it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.